Welcome to the Slow Wine Guide US. I'm here with Mimi Castile, who is the wine grower and winemaker at Hopewell Vineyards and Bethel Heights Vineyards in the Eola Amity Hills sub-AVA of the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Welcome, Mimi.
Thank you. It's very nice to be with you today. Um, as you mentioned, I am the wine grower and winemaker at Hopewell, and I'm also an owner of my family's estate, Bethel Heights Vineyard in the Eola Amity Hills of the Willamette Valley in Oregon. I grew up at Bethel Heights and worked there from 2005 until 2015, and also grew up there when, the vineyards of the Willamette Valley were really nestled into a very diverse, habitat-rich, agriculturally diverse region, and that really set the tone for my childhood and what I wanted to do with my life going forward, even though I didn't realize it at the time. And anyone who grows up with wine at the table, it just becomes a part of who you are and your blood and how you identify yourself. And so it's no surprise that after working for a good chunk of time in forest ecosystems, so my advanced degree is in forest ecology and forest biology, I came back to wine and worked at my family's estate from 2005 till 2015. But since then, I have been exclusively on my own project, Hopewell, and my cousin Ben Castile is the winemaker at Bethel Heights now. And we both, I would say, have taken a very progressive approach to driving forward what we consider sustainability practices in the wine industry. And not just when it comes to having a nice solar array to show people when they come to your tasting room, but specifically the role of wine in having a greater conversation about how we're using the landscape and how we treat working lands. So for me, it's really been a journey, and Hopewell is sort of the ultimate execution of that journey to really identify the leading edge of how we can incorporate ecological principles and habitat models to the agricultural framework. Because if we believe in the word terroir, then it is not just the abiotic factors of aspect, climate, and whatever Mother Nature is throwing at a bare piece of ground. It is absolutely, in its most true sense, the culmination of all of the the biological factors that a place can translate into wine. And that's what kept wine alive through the millennia, is that it really is a nexus of the human spirit, where it marries the biological world and all of the amazing things that can happen in that alchemical process. And so trying to really rebuild that relationship and use wine as much as possible as a conversation starter for people to actually start thinking about the fact that, for the most part, agriculture is at the heart of most of the problems we're facing right now. And so how can we heal through our problems by changing the way we do agriculture in the world? And that is the philosophy of Hopewell. And having been introduced to the manifesto, it's been really encouraging to see that it very much aligns with how we do our work at Hopewell and also at Bethel Heights. So I would say that, first and foremost, we have eliminated, and I've never used synthetic or chemical fertilizers or insecticides, pesticides, anything of that kind. And I think, for me, that's really just baseline. If the world needs those things, then we've kind of set the bar very, very low, because we know that ecological function and high biological output in native ecosystems does not require any of those things. And the cycling of nutrients and the cycling of all of the most important processes is actually interrupted by the use of those things. And so first and foremost, those things have long time ago gone by the wayside. But I think one of the ways that I, especially at Hopewell, sort of stood outside of a viticultural box was in the elimination of any cultivation. So the idea that having any kind of bare ground is basically at odds with the cycling of nutrients, specifically carbon. That was something that I carried with me from my time in the forests and in forest ecosystems, and is just now only beginning to be adopted as I guess a trendy practice in agriculture. I mean, there's a lot of buzz around the term regenerative agriculture, and it will probably also become a space of a lot of greenwashing. But for me, there is no conversation if we're still talking about repeatedly doing this massive disturbance on the land. So repeatedly turning over the soil and exposing soil to the elements that interrupt the cycling of carbon and nitrogen and oxygen. That is fundamental to what we're doing here. And then on top of that, and that's very beautifully detailed in the manifesto, I think the idea that we do not condone the exposure of bare ground, because I think that it had become commonplace, and if anything, a little bit traditional, to have as part of your vineyard experience when you go to visit a vigneron in any part of the world, that you would be shown at some point a handful of bare soil, and that would in some way be spoken about as, you know, the terroir of the place. And certainly that is where all the important transactions happen, but it is also in exposing that is where we lose our capacity to translate truth in terroir. So that is a big deal for me. Another piece of the manifesto that for me really stands out is from the vigneron, the 2009 points of the vigneron, where it talks about the vigneron will not seek for a maximum, but will always seek out the optimum. And I think that in the entirety of the agricultural space, we need to have this conversation transparently and honestly. If we think that extraction and maximizing is the way that we move forward, we've already written the end of our history. So the idea that the best thing is possible, but not the most thing, that appeals to me at the deepest level of my philosophy. And so those 2 points for me are the main points that I think can set the tone as we move forward with our agricultural practices. Certification has been a big part of, you know, what we do here at Hopewell, just because I believe in accountability to the people who buy our products. So we certify organic, and we are also investigating being a part of the regenerative organic standard that's being developed currently. And I've had a lot of conversations with that group as they develop their standards for viticulture, because my experience in certification heretofore has been to see the diminishing or the relaxing of standards as you try to grow the base of people that you are bringing in. And that has always bothered me about certification. And so we do certify organic, but it is with the expectation that that's never going to be enough. And it's certainly never going to be the limit of what we believe we need to be doing on the land in order to build the future that we want to see for our children, but that we would take it very seriously to always be driving that conversation forward with the practices that we do, and hopefully inspiring through those practices as well. So in those conversations with the groups that are, you know, developing standards around regenerative agriculture, I always try to point out that we need to kind of have two minds about this. The ultimate goal and the only real concern that I have is that certification is always going to be a burden for the people who are doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. the people who need to do this work are the people who are the most resistant to it. So how do we make regenerative practices conventional practices again, as they were before the Great War, basically? Putting these tools in the hands of people and shining a light on the future of technological agriculture. It's nobody's fault that we've come to this place. All of these things that have gotten us into this terrible place that we are now were presented as miracles to people who had worked so hard just to make a living. And they did so with the support of their communities and the infrastructure of basically the small economies that supported them. And so we need to start rebuilding those communities of people who understand where their food comes from and understand the value of what a healthy agricultural ecosystem means for themselves and their families, even if they live in cities. And so rebuilding the ties between human beings and their connection to all of the life that sustains them is where I want to do most of my work. And so I think that certification is helpful, but it's never going to get us where we need to go. We need to have a vulnerable, honest place for people to come and learn the way to work differently so that they feel safe and they don't feel judged. And yet we also need to be very rigorous about what we consider a true standard or a torch in the front. And we need to not relax those standards just to bring those people in. And so I think that one of the benefits of a thing like the manifesto, and whatever you want to call it, if it's a manifesto or a treaty or an agreement of some kind, is that it is a document unto itself. And you kind of can then say, this is the standard and this is what we will not relent about. But as you come in, you don't necessarily have to be the gold standard right away. You don't necessarily have to spend, 20% of your proceeds on an expensive certification. But if you are moving in this direction, then you always have that guiding light. And we cannot allow that guiding light to be anything less than brilliant, because if it's dimmer by any measure, then the whole future is at stake. And we can't mince words about that anymore. We are in the kind of situation that nobody wants to be in, where if we don't act now and with all of our resources as though this is the biggest threat to our future, then again, our future is certain. I have children, and 2020 has been a year of great turmoil, and we've all experienced various tragedies in this year. I don't want to take anything away from all of the things that are happening all over the world. But specifically, to inspire people in their best hearts and in the best version of themselves. And so if we can continue to use philosophies and documents like the manifesto to remind ourselves that the only salve for our current wounds is doing this work and moving forward in the direction that we want our future to go, it's always the direction that you turn your head that you will end up going. And so we can't look back. We can't turn around and be licking our wounds. We have to move forward for our children's sake. And I think that, we're going to have to be honest about things like whether or not smoke or the presence of an impression of a wildfire nearby our precious wine growing regions is going to be part of our terroir for some period of time in the tradition of these places, that this will be an important part of our history, and that we need to record that as part of our history, so that when our children's wines are being opened next to the wines from 2017, 2016, 2018, 2020 for sure, that they'll be able to talk about what we did in this moment to make their wines more whole, more about healthy ecosystems, and that that was the most important work that had been done in the last 1,000 years. So I see this as a moment of great hope, where we have only the best tools in front of us, only the best minds working for us, and we just have to work together. And so exclusivity isn't something that I care to talk about right now. I want to talk about inclusivity, and that open heart, open mind, but rigorous standard and unrelenting desire to move forward at as rapid a pace as we possibly can, and helping all of our brothers and sisters who want to come on this journey with us, because the more the merrier. Whatever step you're willing to take, I'll take it with you, and we can all hold hands through this. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these things. And I am so grateful to all of the other vignerons around the world who are trying to use this as a guiding light as well.
I can't thank you enough for your comments, Mimi, and they will be shared globally. Thanks so much.